Hello, networkers, and welcome back to another episode of Ask the Network Engineer, where I will answer one of your questions. In this episode, I'm going to talk about network engineers being self employed versus being employed by a company and the pros and cons. And I bring this up because I got three great questions in regards to those particular topics. So the first question was from JDan303, and he says that I'm writing because I want to get your advice on starting my own IT consulting business. My plan is to start off building and troubleshooting small business networks, then work my way up to like medium and larger size environments. Another question is by Cousin. And his question is, what tips would you give to professionals that are new to contracting? What are some of the challenges that only occur with contracting positions and how could they overcome that? And another question by Slaphouse, and he says, what are the business ownership areas available as a network engineer? So he's wondering about business opportunities for network engineers. So let's go ahead and talk about that in this episode. The best place to really start this conversation is to give you a quick history about myself. So I've been in the networking field for about almost 20 years. It's a long time. And in the very first 10 years of my career, I was a network engineer working in various companies. I became a senior network engineer and eventually a senior backbone engineer. Now, when you get to 10 years, okay, a network engineer for 10 years in, you're basically a veteran. And you got to ask yourself a simple question. What is next in my career? Now, typically it's two particular paths. And I talked about this before in other episodes on this channel. But the first path is the management track, where you become maybe a network manager or director or VP, and maybe a CIO or a CTO. That's also a possibility. Okay. Or you continue on the engineering track, but you become a consultant. And that means that instead of just managing one network that you typically do in a company, you're managing, deploying, designing hundreds of different networks for different customers with different unique requirements. That is typically the two tracks you can take. So for me, I had to make a decision. Which one am I going to do? Well, I didn't have any interest in becoming a manager or a director or anything like that. You know, going to meetings, dealing with business type stuff, managing people and their complaints about other employees. I had no interest in that at all. But I did like the aspect of being part of a team because I've always been like a team leader in particular projects or deployments. And my team relied on me on what they were going to do as part of this bigger project. Things like I would tell them, you're taking care of the access components, you're taking care of the distribution, I'll take care of the backbone infrastructure itself. Whatever it is, we work together as a team, and I love that environment. It's a great thing, right? It's a great learning experience for them. It's a great learning experience for me. You know, I like that environment. So I like that aspect, not managing people. Then there's the consulting track or the engineering and becoming a consultant. No, okay, I like that, you know, because I'm very eager. I like to, learn a lot of things, and being a consultant is really the best way to learn about a lot of things because you're involved in many different type of projects and different customer environments. But I didn't like the idea that I could be a consultant working for a particular company because my biggest concern was when I would leave to a different company, it was always because I didn't like the politics that I was seeing in the environment. I didn't agree with the vision or the direction of what the company was doing. And it always resulted in something that never worked. I'm just an employee, so I can't tell management or directors what they need to be doing. That's not my place. I'm there to manage or design the network. That's my job roles. Okay? So I did something very different. I didn't do the first or the second track. I did a third track, and that was to become an independent consultant. And from that endeavor, I've been doing that for 10 years. So I built the company as Route Hub. It's not one person, actually it's 5 people within our company. So I am the senior consultant. I have other technicians that work for me. We have business people. So those are the kind of people that we have. Just 5 people. That's all we actually have. Okay, we're very, very small business. Okay, and here's something to keep in mind. Whatever you do, whether it is self-employed or working for a company, there are pros and cons. And for me, who have worked for a company or worked in companies for 10 years, and then being self-employed for 10 plus years, because I'm still self-employed as we speak, I've seen the good and the bad for both. And let's talk about that, because really the questions that JDan303, Slap, House, and Cousin are talking about are really the pros and cons, and something that you guys need to really, really think about. Because yes, there's a lot of great things what I do for being self-employed. I love being self-employed, but I tell you the truth, there are days where things would be a whole lot easier if I just went to work, sat at my desk, did my job, and go home and spend time with my kids and do the things that I care about. Programming, running, whatever it is like that. So let's start this conversation for real and talk about pros and cons and things to consider if you are really thinking about self-employment as a potential next path or opportunity. Let's first talk about self-employment or starting your own business, the pros and cons. So the biggest pro to start with is flexibility. That's a big one for me. I'm here today probably because of flexibility. Okay. And what that means is you get to do what you want to do, what you want to specialize in. So when I started out, I started doing consulting for Cisco products only. So Cisco switches, routers, firewalls, unified communication systems. That's what I did. And it made me basically a niche. It was like a niche market because a lot of people kind of did everything. I just did only Cisco. So I attracted a lot of the medium and the large size companies. So that was great. Now for marketing, well, I just marketed that, hey, I'm a 10-year CCIE with experience in government and banking and nonprofit, many different industries. So I had my CCIE name, or my number, I guess, and I use that for my branding of the company to show the credibility, what I could do for those companies. That worked 100%. That's why I tell you guys, get certified as high as you can, because that is a very powerful weapon, ammunition that you can use even if you are self-employed. Another big pro is with scheduling, and this deals with when you work and how you work. Now, of course, in the beginning, you got to keep this in mind. When you start your own business, you'll be very, very busy, okay? Because you're trying to build up clients, you're trying to build a reputation, okay? But after a while, you're going to get into your groove and you're going to get clients and projects basically very normally, okay? But for me right now, 10 years in, I do all my work remotely. I do not do anything on site anymore, at least in the past 5 years. I don't work after hours. I don't work on the weekends. I don't work during holidays. I'm not on call. That is the flexibility that you get when you have your own business. When you work for a company, you got to follow the schedule that your management wants for you. Now, keep in mind, and this is actually a con for being self-employed, when you're more restricted with what you provide, the number of clients that are possible gets a lot smaller. So you got to be very cautious of that. If you do support and you're a consultant, then you are in a really good market because everybody needs technical support. Things break. I talked about that a lot. But again, I just found a particular way how to make it work. I do deployments, I do design, but I also provide training services. Training is such a huge deal because technology is moving very fast. There are a lot of new products out there, and engineers and consultants are trying to find very quick ways to learn how to deploy products. But there is the cons. And even though you may be doing technical work, you still have to deal with the business side of things. And it really depends on how your business is formed, or not really. But most people will form their business as maybe as a corporation, an LLC, or a partnership of some kind. So you got to deal with the paperwork for that, the renewals and the costs associated with that. You got to deal with things like with taxes, business taxes, which is very different compared to personal taxes. That means that you have to pay someone to actually do your business taxes for you. Okay, that can be pretty expensive. You got to deal with things with accounting or bookkeeping. You got to deal with billing your customers for work that you have done. Okay, and dealing with if they don't pay for their invoices, you have to deal with that as well. That does happen from time to time. I guess it depends more on the kind of customers that you do have. You got to deal with human resource type of responsibilities, especially if you have maybe one or two type of employees. Dealing with, employee complaints, dealing with vacation time, sick days, things like that. You got to deal with, the sales and the marketing aspect and how you're going to market your services, to people to contact you and to you continue to run your business. And there is the legal and the fraud components that could come up that you will have to deal with. That is probably the biggest one for me. Because some days, certain things come up and I just tell myself, it would be a whole lot better if I was not dealing with this crap. If I would be at my desk in some company, configuring routers, switches, that's a lot better than this garbage. I remember when I was starting out with the business, we were selling Cisco hardware. Okay, so we were a Cisco partner. I got a couple of plaques back there. We were a select partner and a premier partner. And it was a good avenue to grow our business. Anyway, so one day we got this opportunity by email from a company called 3M. It's a large company, and they had this very large quote with a lot of hardware. And it was going to give us like $35,000 in our pocket. This was a big deal for us. We were very, very excited, but hesitant because, we never really done this before at that level. Anyway, so a couple of days later, the person responds back, who sent out the quote saying, hey, we want this right away. We got a big project coming up. Here's our banking confirmation sheets. Here's our PO. He gave us all this documentation, and we're looking through it. We don't know what it means, but we're like, this looks legit. We're excited, but I'm a little scared too. I'm an engineer. I'm not a business person, right? Anyway, I do know that one thing happened that I learned. A friend of mine a long time ago who has his own business said, when you're dealing with quotes or PO, where you got to spend your money up front first, you need to call the company directly, talk to their purchasing department, and validate the PO. Okay? So very quickly, let me step back for a quick second. So typically what happens is that, let's say that you want to buy a router from my company. So what happens is I would have to pay for that router with my own money. Okay, put on a credit card, for example. Then I would send out an invoice that would say due on receipt, which means you have to pay right away, not within 30 days or 60 days. So I would get that check, of course, within a week, and I will cash it in. So then basically I get my markup. Okay, so that goes into our pockets, and we pay for the router costs that we had to purchase initially. So that's really how that works. A lot of companies change their policy for that. They ask for like maybe a 25 or 50% deposit first, or they ask to be part of the project for configuring. So there are a lot of different requirements that companies may have. Okay, so that meant that we would have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for equipment in order for us to pocket $35,000. Anyway, but again, my friend taught me, who is a business owner, said you need to always call and validate these things, especially if you are spending money out of your own pocket initially. Okay, and he said you do not use the phone number or the email address that is on the email that sent the initial request. You go to Google and you find the main company website through that particular path. So that's what I did. I went to the main website for 3M. I found a phone number. I contacted them, and I want to be transferred to the purchasing department. So I did, and And I told them that I am calling to validate a PO that your company placed with us or sent to us. She says, no problem. What's the PO number? So I gave the number. And she said, I'm sorry, but that number is not the format that we use. And I'm like, okay, just to validate, this is the number, this is the PO number that I have on the PO, okay, with your letterhead, okay, on your letterhead, is from this person and other information about that. And she said, that person does not work here. And it occurred to me that that was a fraudulent opportunity. And she determined that they have received very similar complaints with people that have called in because they have been victimized. So what happened is, for some of these people, they have actually purchased equipment and shipped it to the name and address on the documentation. So now they're calling because they wanted to get, basically, get paid for the hardware, and they're not getting paid. I was so angry. I was beyond angry because I was this close of losing more than $100,000 that would impact me and my family in a really bad way. I said, can I talk to your legal department? So I started talking to them. We got the police involved. I said, we got to do something. We got to catch these guys. What can we do? We got to do something, though. This kind of stuff can't happen. Okay? I don't know where it is now. The point that I'm trying to illustrate for this particular example is that when you have your own business, this is the kind of stuff that you may have to deal with. And of course, there's fraud even within our training program, with people doing fraudulent orders with credit cards that doesn't belong to them. So we have a lot of strong security to really detect those kind of activities and to stop them. But again, that's what we have to deal with on the business side. So it's definitely not a pro. It is a con to keep in mind if you want to do your own business. Here's another con, and that is with reliability. That it is not very reliable to be really self-employed compared to working for a company. When you're self-employed, you are really working month to month. It's all about the number of billable hours that you can get. If you get a lot of billable hours, then fantastic. If you don't, it can be very, very tough for you that month, even personally. So you got to keep that factor in mind. Another con that I will definitely bring up is limited training and resources, basically. When you work for large companies, and I worked for a lot of large companies as an employee, not as a business owner, I get direct access to Cisco or to Avaya or Aruba, a lot of different companies. And I get direct access to hardware that we get to borrow, right? I remember at the lab, I borrowed tons of new hardware that I would go ahead and I would test and experiment all different kind of designs, all right? So that was really, really great. Now, if you are a gold partner, then yeah, you get access to the same deals. But you got to have like 5 CCIEs on staff. That's for larger companies. I'm not a large company, so I don't have access to those kind of resources that I used to have when I was working at companies. That's kind of a big con because I have to find particular crafty ways to accomplish that. Like I have friends that work at Cisco. They're SCs right now. And I have friends in different environments. So I basically find ways of getting into those environments to get the knowledge that I need. So then I can go ahead and market myself for providing those kind of training services. So the limited access to training and resources is something to keep in mind also.